Effective communication presented by USA Rugby National Panel referee John Stevens. Johnny, are you there?
I hope so. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can certainly hear you, mate. You're coming through loud and clear. Awesome. Obviously, you're in Chicago. I can hear police sirens everywhere.
Yeah, I know. Just it's a bit quiet today, isn't it?
So, for those of you who have not met John or don't know John, John Stevens has been a USA Rugby National Panel referee for many, many years. He has refereed several international matches throughout the Caribbean. Obviously, we can all know he's come from the Isles of the English with that accent of his. Top bloke and still on the national panel, and will be refereeing in the PRP this year starting on Saturday, which is pretty exciting for you, John. How are you feeling?
Yeah, very good. Little bit nervous about the temperature differential. Seeing as I'm sat up here in the frozen north, I'm being mugged by polar bears and night walkers, and then going to like a melting pot that is the sunshine. But we'll be all right.
Yeah, I think you'll be fine, mate. You know, just it's about having a positive attitude, and a willingness to learn.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
No,
Look.
all yours, mate.
Okay. Well, I'll pass it over to John. And please ask questions. I'll be here going through the questions. Type them in. If you want to talk live to us, which I encourage, don't be shy. Put your hand up and I'll click you through. So, Jono, here we go. It's all yours, mate.
Thanks, Scotty. So, hi, everybody. As Scotty said, I'm on the national panel over here. I'm from the UK originally, which they hand out incomprehensible, mumbling British accents. So, from a communication point, hopefully you can all understand me. Otherwise, the irony would be magnificent. So, let's take it away. So, I think one of the big things about refereeing, no matter what level you are, and also something that will determine sort of how far you can go, is how you communicate. And I think communication is something that everybody does all the time, but it is a skill that can be learnt and you can get better at it. And it isn't by any accident or coincidence that those who can communicate the best and most clearly find themselves rising towards the top of the pile, be it local, regional, national, or international assignments. Also, on Scotty's flyer, it was about how to bring some communication from the boardroom to the rugby pitch. I think in any walk of life, and you'll see that a lot of the great referees have had very, very strong careers outside of rugby, which require certain communication skills. Picking on British people, because I know them, Chris White was a teacher, and there's an awful lot of teachers. You have a look, there's a lot of ex-policemen. Wayne Barnes is a lawyer. Alan Rallan was in sales. Our own great Richard Every is a marketing and sales professional. So I think from a communication point of view, it certainly does pay to have a very clear idea of what good looks like, but then practice and have an openness and willingness to learn. Scotty, would you add anything to that?
No, I agree, mate. I was feeling a little bit bad because I don't have a high profile career anymore. After being banished from New Zealand, where I was an All Black trialist. So yeah.
Cool. So can we flip over? Come on, you can do it faster than that. There we go. So some of the things we're going to cover today, we're going to cover off some of the basics about communication, not necessarily all the obvious ones, but I think some basic skills. Second time, for those who are a little bit geeky like myself, give you some data points and some more technical things. And then hopefully we can wrap this up and give you some things that you can take away, think about, and sort of use over the coming weeks and for the rest of the season. So I hope that sounds all right to everybody. So let's and get cracking. So on the basics, I think before we go anywhere, it's expected that all officials have to have a good working knowledge of the laws of the game and the mechanics of how things actually work. Okay, so if you're on the USA Rugby Facebook page, there's a lot of focus on getting law right. I think we all need to know what we're doing. We also need to understand how things work. If the ball was at the back of a ruck on the red side, and then for some reason it magically pops up on blues, even if you didn't see it, magical fairies don't exist. Understanding that will help you get to a much better decision. From a communication point of view, I think there are sort of 4 main points that you can control, and therefore sort of 4 main things that you can influence by yourself. The first one is your appearance. So do you turn up looking like a referee, someone who's fully in control of the game and is going to earn and deserve the respect of the players? Or do you turn up like someone who maybe doesn't? So you can definitely take a very strong step forward if you turn up and you're wearing a society tracksuit. If it's a more formal, higher level game, sort of number 1s or something like that, just to give the impression to everyone around you that you're the official, you're here to do a job, and you know what you're doing so you can do it well. Then, sort of when you're in the game, there are 3 main points. You've got the voice, the whistle, and then hand signals. So from vocals, I think there's some things that you can work on. The first one is just be aware of who you are. If you're softly spoken, understand that, because if you don't come across as authentic in what you're saying, i.e. if you're softly spoken trying to be a drill sergeant, or if you're a drill sergeant trying to soften it down too much, it doesn't add up and players won't buy into you. The second one, with a whistle, understand and vary your tone appropriately. So for a knock on or the ball that goes into touch, a short, sharp peep on the whistle is sort of all you need. For something sort of more, a penalty, a longer blast, a penalty with foul play, you should be blowing your lungs out. And for a try, something that's very celebratory. Okay, so the worst thing that you want to have is a nice long blast of the whistle. Everyone doesn't know what's going on and it's just a scrum. One thing which I know is a bugbear of some of the evaluators towards the TRRA national level is make sure you've got a sort of a proper deep rugby whistle rather than a soccer one. Again, that just helps to the credibility. And then lastly, around hand signals, your voice, as loud as it can be, will carry, but it doesn't have the largest effective range. If you then scale it up, someone looking at your game from 70 meters away, how will they know what's going on if your signals are sort of rushed or incorrect? So understand what the right signals are, but then make them nice and big, nice and slow, nice and open. So even that proverbial man walking the dog, when the whistle goes, they can tell if it's something that's minor or something that's major, and then what it was for. Because again, your communication in how you go about that game, I think, is something that you can definitely paint a very good picture and allow everybody who's involved, players, coaches, and supporters, to feel part of it and understand what's going on. Scotty, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I agree with those points. I think when you arrive at the pitch, the players basically sum you up in a few seconds and have an opinion of you, or form an opinion of you that's very difficult to change. So I like the idea of turning up in your uniform or in your society, polo or tracksuit. That's great. Looking like an athlete's also important for those who can still be athletic. So that are great points. Also, with the whistle, it really relates to your confidence. So I find that referees that have great whistle tone come across a lot more confident than maybe they truly are. So it's a little bit of act playing, I guess, when it comes to the whistle tone as well as your signals. It's just about making the players believe that you have the ability to officiate the match that you're in, and that it all adds up. How you look when you arrive and when you're on the field, as your whistle tone sound good, are your signals sharp and clear? It's the package deal, isn't it, John?
I think so. And then I'd add to the last bit on appearance, and the basics is around fitness. As in, you're not going to gain the trust of the players if you're not in the right place to make the right decision. If you can't speak, however, when you get to the right position, it doesn't really help that much either. So as best as you can, work on your positioning and your fitness, because then everything else can then be a lot more controlled and less rushed, I guess is the way that I like to think about it. Is if you're totally out of breath and you're completely gassed and someone wants you to explain something, in your first 5 seconds are just 5 huge inward heaves of breath, again, it doesn't do a lot for your credibility.
Yeah, fair enough. I agree with that.
So you skip down, that's it, thank you, to the next slide. So the second bit is sort of understanding your audience. And I think there's a Frank Sinatra song that is I've Got You Under My Skin. And I think that perfectly describes the conflicted feelings that coaches and officials have to each other.
Do you want me to sing that, John? Is that something you want me to sing now, or are we good?
All the time. You've got such a lovely singing voice. I'd never turn down an opportunity to listen to it.
Thank you so much.
I'm not entirely sure that's the words that it's got.
Okay.
Oh, that's awkward now. Anyway, so with coaches and the referees, I think one thing is clear, that we've both got a mutual passion for the game. But then I think that's always tempered by our intense wariness towards each other, sort of the yin, the yang, the Jedi, the Sith, etc. So understand sort of where they're coming from, and if you can understand what a coach is trying to achieve, and at the same time, if they can understand what you're trying to achieve, I think you can get to a much better spot. We'll cover that in a little bit more detail later. I think one of the things that consistently comes up, and having refereed sort of in London, Australia, New York, and now in Chicago, it seems that there's a ever increasing sort of thing about referee abuse. And so one very important thing is about the ability to handle players and coaches is crucial to becoming sort of a complete referee. And if it's your desire to moving up the ranks, one of the things I've been thinking about is, what does to handle a player and coaches actually mean? And to me, I think that is really just an ability to be able to effectively communicate with them in a situation where there's natural conflict. They clearly didn't see that as a forward pass. They clearly didn't see the 5 missed tackles that led to the try as the reason. It was something that happened 5 minutes before. So it's the ability for you to then take that out, take the emotion out, understand where they're coming from, but also give them something back. And then the last one, which is always a favourite, especially around high school games, and the higher level games you do, the more fans there are. I think as a fans, they usually exhibit sort of 3 characteristics. a complete ignorance of the rules in some instances, highly emotional partisanship, and a delight in antagonizing officials. So taking those three very negative things, I think one of the important parts that anyone could take away as a basic is to try and block that out. A very smart man from Florida, Mr. Haas, told me years ago that you actually, if you're in the zone and you're really focused, you're not actually going to notice the crowd at all. And that, to me, that's absolutely right. If I'm 100% focused on what I'm doing and I'm doing the best that I can, it's very, very rarely that I hear anyone shouting anything from the field. That said, I'm not going to tell you to completely ignore what's going on from the sideline, because I think from a feedback point of view, that can be positive in some instances. And so what I'd like to people to maybe focus on as the game's going on, if you do have a reasonable crowd and that crowd is energized, so they're getting up and they're like, yay, great play, everyone's moving, and there's swings, and I think what you're doing there is you are, as a referee, creating a very saleable, very exciting product that the crowd is getting engaged in, and that is absolutely what we want. If all you can hear, and you've got 400 people there, is the sound of crickets in the background, then potentially there might be something that isn't quite going as well as you thought. Scotty, would you add anything to that?
Yes, I agree. The question I would like to ask you, when you are confronted by a player or a coach, and they are clearly frustrated, do you have any tips or strategies that our referees can use to diffuse the coaches or players?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, actually, and a very, very big topic. So I think the first one, and we'll touch on this a little bit later, is you're given 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. So I think the first thing in any communication is actually just to shut up and just try and pay attention to understand where they're coming from. For instance, I'm going to take an angry player. Okay, there's a couple of reasons why a player could be angry, and it's A, they could just be angry, but I think that's a very basic way for you to look and isn't really going to get you very far. To me, there's a couple of reasons why that might happen. Now, the first, that person is upset because they think you are denying them from doing something that they wanted to do, and as such are upset. The second one could be, do they feel that you are not preventing the opposition from doing something that they shouldn't be doing? Or a third one is they're being pumped by 50 points and they're just angry.
Yeah, so, usually it's the third, isn't it, Jono? A lot of thirds.
It can be. So I think for the first two is just really take a breath back and try and understand where that player's coming from and get them to sort of use their words properly. But one of the things which I think you need to make sure is that communication needs to be done appropriately and in the appropriate scenario.
Yeah.
So you can't have, for you to, as a referee, exhibit control and be in charge of what you're looking at, you can't have 100 or 30 players coming up to you every single time and twittering at you and you entertaining that, because after a while you're one of 33 people on a field and your voice is going to get lost. So you need to set very clear boundaries, but you can set clear boundaries in a very respectful way. In some instances, again, every game is very different. Some games are like the the best thing in the world, where everyone wants to play rugby, and it's a wonderful, joyous experience, and you just have to like sit back and run around after everybody. Other games, it's a completely horrible, turgid affair where everybody's angry, everybody's frustrated, and the game is very disjointed, and that causes for, a need for a very, very different style of approach.
Yep.
So again, we'll cover that. But to your question, some tips that I give: take some time just to observe what's going on, and try and have a look at it from the people's point of view. I think other things that you can do is give yourself space, give yourself time. So if there's been an incident and temperatures have risen, not communicating straight away actually communicates a lot. So the ability to talk, but also not talk. And you can see some of the great referees from a few years ago, they could do a lot with a very stern stare. I think Nigel Owens has also got quite a good stare on him at times. There's a very good, famous one where Chris Robshaw, England are playing France, and Robshaw's just twittering in his ear, and Owens just looks at Christopher and gives him sort of a stern look. And then, despite the 12 inches and 100 pounds difference between the two guys, Robshaw was made to look like a schoolboy at that point. So
yeah,
there's a lot that you can do by giving yourself time and space, being respectful to the players, but also demand respect for yourself. The second one, I think, is where we need to strike a good balance. Respect does come from wearing the jersey. Like, Texas referees are well respected all across the country. So whenever someone turns up, as in if you're wearing it, you've got a certain amount of credibility when you walk through the door. But you've got to continue earning it throughout the game, and that is how you are communicating, and how you are managing the game so players can accept you.
Okay, John. Let's go to the question board, because we've got a few questions coming in,
Okay.
and just see what they have to say. So, Kat is going to come in and ask a question. I think. Yep, I've unmuted Kat, so you're live now. Kat, ask John whatever you want.
Is that Kat Rowe?
Hey, John. Yes, it is.
Welcome to Texas.
Thanks. Welcome to the webinar.
It's my first time. I'm so nervous.
It was mine too. I didn't know how to put my hand up to ask a question.
Oh, so cute.
Anyway, so thanks. So my question is, do you have a pregame ritual where you go and introduce yourself to the coaches? And if so, do you find that helps you? I mean, either during the game they have a bit more respect, or afterwards they're more willing to share critically with you, like, their opinions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So pre-match communication is definitely a very big topic, and I do have some views on it. So thank you for teeing that up, and I think Scott has them as well. So in going to meet the coach, a lot of the time, I, being British, err on the side of formality. So if I know who it is, so if I know a Marty Veal, I know a Jack Clark, I know who those are, it's quite easy to go up and say hello. And I'd always use like Mr. Clark as a first instance. Outside of that, if you're going up to a group and you don't know who the coach is, I think a very good way in is to say very respectfully, sort of walk over and go, excuse me, looking for the coach, could you point me in the right direction, please? And then you're not assuming that one person is a coach or not. And then when they say, oh yeah, that's me, it's like, oh, fantastic, hi, I'm John, I'm your referee for today. And then just have a sort of a nice conversation there. I think in a pre-match, what you don't want to do I think you need to have a conversation, and you need to open yourself up to have an open dialogue. And always a good question, if you have time, is there anything that you're particularly looking for today? But then just be careful to manage that conversation, because coaches, some might believe they have an advantage to be gained from influencing you by saying, oh, I've seen that other team, their loose head pops up every single time, and hopes to give you that wonderful piece of information. So all you're doing is looking at their loose head while theirs is swinging their hips out and going straight in on the hooker each time. So I think be open, be friendly, be polite, but also try and keep it short, because whilst they want to know, and it's important that they meet you and you try and build some sort of rapport, it's also important to note that their preparation for the game is far outweighs their desire to really have a long, in-depth discussion about everything rugby related with you. And similarly, you don't want to be stuck talking to a coach for too long because you've got your own things that you need to do. So I go over, have a conversation, sort of nice chit chat, see if there's anything that you can help, or they can help clarify what you're looking for, and move on. If that, go on.
Sorry, John. I was just going to say the important thing about the beginning of a match, or when you first meet the coaches and the players, as we said a bit earlier, is that they will sum you up in a few seconds. So it's important that you're going over there and we're keeping it casual, and we're not coming across as if we are a headmaster or the big boss man out there. It's important to come across as an equal and do our best to give them a good impression, or make a good impression on them. First of all, that would be my advice with my initial interaction before the match. Casual, we're not getting ramped up an hour before the match mentally in our mind. We're trying to build some rapport with key players. Go shake a few hands. If it's your personality type, maybe crack a few jokes. Let the players know that you're human too, and I think that carries out on the field a lot more than anything else we can do pre-match. Hey, I'm one of you. And that's what I would recommend. And that's how I do my pre-match stuff. We have another question. We have another question, Jono.
Okay.
And this is from Drew. I don't know, Drew, if you want to ask it or you just want me to ask it for you. I'll ask it for you. When setting clear boundaries, what is your suggestion for communicating those and then enforcing them? Oh, Drew Lowe, the silent assassin.
That's a question enough.
Yes, yeah. So when you're setting your boundaries, what's your suggestion for communicating those and then enforcing them? What do you think, John?
So again, I think it depends. I'm going to give a very weak answer there. So I think the important thing is, when you're setting your boundaries, have a very realistic belief as to what those boundaries can be. If you go in and say, I am never going to allow A, B, and C, such as I'm never going to allow a tackler to go, a supporting player to go off their feet, which is a perfectly legal objective for a referee to have. But in practice, it might not be as practical. So if you say, I'll never do it, never let it, and I'll penalise you, the first one you let go because, I don't know, arriving 7 has just gone a little bit too far and has sort of tripped up over his man on the floor, but there's no one there to compete against, and you don't blow it, you've then put yourself into a box that you get very, very hard to climb out of.
Yeah, so, that's a good point, that one, eh? You don't want to box yourself in, and I think sometimes just the boundary word, it seems a little bit inflexible. And maybe, Drew, you want to go read some of Bruce Lee's philosophy about being a little bit a lot more like water. and going with the flow there. Because you end up getting yourself into all sorts of situations. As far as communicating them, John, I would say it's good you want to try to relate to the player and then have some empathy, and then go in to try to get them to come around to your side. So a good example would be, I understand that that's frustrating for you. However, I need you to do this, or can you do this for me? If you do this, then A, B, and C. I think a lot more honey and a lot less vinegar when we're dealing with rugby players tends to, in the long run, get you more respect. What do you think about that, John?
Yeah, I think that's certainly the way to go. As in, no one ever feels good about being shouted at. Like, Scott, this is a terribly run webinar.
Yeah, fair enough.
No, Scott and nobody around on this on the call would have ever felt that was a good thing to do. However, if we could be specific, so 7 off your feet, you understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to go for that ball, but if you just say 7, more accuracy, don't go beyond and come back, you're giving them information as to how they can avoid it in the future. And so back to a point before, you are not going to then penalize them or continuously penalize them and not tell them why, almost like smacking a dog on the nose. It has no idea what it's done. It just knows it's been smacked on the nose. If you say...
They know, dogs know. They know when they're naughty.
So more accuracy around that. Just going back to sort of melding that question with cats, taking it apart as in the kind of things that you want to discuss with a team, I think are actually pretty light, as in the teams are, again, gearing up for a game that they want to play. Yes, you're a part of it, but it's not your game. So you're there to help them play it better and make the game better for everybody. So from a communication point, for a scrum briefing, I keep it short. And for me, Scott, I'd love to get your input on this as well.
Sure.
I say exactly the same thing every single time. Because I've practiced it and I cover off everything that I want to say from a briefing, but also a legal point of view. So if you ever get into a situation, which we all hope we never do, and touch wood, I never have yet, but someone gets you to say, did you do a briefing? What did you say? Then I can say, I said this because it's the same thing that I've said every weekend for the last 6 years.
Yeah, I agree. That's
so I think
point.
So that's something very good. So if you don't have a pre-match briefing, practice it, because again, front rows aren't interested in listening to, for me, a 6'3", 210-pound guy who clearly wasn't in the front row. They don't want to listen to me telling them about it. They just want to continue with their warm up and get stuck in.
Yeah, I think the pre-game, really, the big umbrella is rapport building. I mean, that's really what we want to do as referees. We want to go in there. We've got a few minutes to build some rapport, and that should be your main focus. We're not going to change behavior in a pre-match briefing, so don't waste your time telling them what you're going to do if they do A, B, and C. I need to see this and that and all that. That does nothing to build rapport and trust and respect. We want to go in there, build some rapport, keep your work-related talk, the front row talk, anything about the game, very, very brief. Cover the basics. If you have any questions, feel free to talk to me, Captain. If you talk to me nice, I'll talk to you nice, or however you want to get that across. But keep it brief, keep it light, and we want to build rapport in that beginning part. The first hour before kickoff. That's what it's all about. Rapport. Boom. Yeah.
Yeah, I think on that one, nothing helps build. So a one-way conversation or two people having a monologue doesn't get you anywhere. But a very good way or very easy way to build rapport is to ask a couple of questions, especially if the coach, as in, so can you just talk me through what is your plan for attack? If they are just going to hit hammer balls all day, then for you, it also means that just get out of channel one, otherwise you'll get run over. But as long as you can get some short side, offside space, you're going to have a pretty nice day. If they say they want to spread it wide, then you need to make sure you keep your outside channel offside lines back as well, and make sure you got your running boots on. So if you ask questions like that about how they're sort of willing to play, A, it demonstrates that you're a student of the game, and B, can sort of help you if you don't have tape or any other things to be prepared for. You can build quite a lot of rapport and goodwill by asking some very useful questions. So maybe think about what questions you'd like to ask of a coach ahead of the time.
Okay, Jono, I have another question come in from one of our newer referees here in the 512, and that is Robert. And Robert has asked, as a new referee, should we let the players and the coaches know that we are new? What's your thoughts there, John? Do you think we should be saying that we're a new referee, or should we hide that?
I think honesty is always the best policy. I probably wouldn't use it as my opening line. Hi, I'm John. This is my first time. I think from one thing I think is for certain, and Scotty, you'll be able to confirm this, is your society's not going to put you into a spot straight away that you can't handle. Okay, so when you're just starting, you're going to make mistakes, and that's perfectly acceptable. I think the one thing that you just need to go in with from your own side is an openness to accept if you make a mistake. I think nobody likes a belligerent person with a whistle who refuses to acknowledge that they've made a mistake just because they're wearing the orange jersey.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a great point, and honesty and I think through being vulnerable like that and saying, hey, look, I'm really new at this. I'm sort of nervous. Take it easy on me, sort of thing. You can do that. I think that's another great way to get some rapport and trust with the rugby community. And for the most part, Robert, I think you will find that the rugby community in general are a great bunch of people. They're caring, so I would go out and say, look, this is my first or second match or whatever the number may be. And, with a bit of a smile on your face, say, take it easy on me. And if you are going to shout, make sure it's on my right side because I'm deaf in the left ear. So, there's things like that you can do. But, yeah, definitely tell them that you knew. Most people will figure that out pretty quickly, when you're running around with a little soccer whistle. So,
yeah, the one thing, and I kind of did this because I got thrown into a game at the last minute in London where it was about my fourth game ever. I felt like I needed to bluff and say, oh yeah, I've been doing a lot more, and I kind of invented a CV. It was the worst idea I ever had, because it comes through. So just be authentic, be honest, and then just remember, try and be consistent. It's all about safety, enjoyment, fairness for both sides, and then the law's number 4. So if you can get 15 people or 14 people if you're doing sevens off the field a little bit more tired with a big smile on their face, you've had a great game. The fact that you didn't award a maul turnover to the right team or whatever, no one's going to remember. No one's going to really care.
Yeah. Okay. I have another question has come in. Sorry, from the Bean from the far north. Thoughts on communicating through the captain versus being chatty with the whole team? I think I'll have a crack at this one, then pass it over to John. This is really about reading the situation, and if you have the ability to read the situation, or you are you can sort of pick up on the emotion of the game, that would determine for me how I handle the situation. Now, if it's 50 to nil, the team that's winning by 50 usually having a good old laugh with most of the people. When you set a scrum, you get a bit of a laugh with the front row and all that sort of carry on. But once the game is a 2-point game and it's a semi-final, that may change how I would do it. My advice would be, for the newer referee learning the trade or learning the art of refereeing, I would start by using the captain as my go-to, and sort of practice my lines and practice my communication skills with the captain for a few seasons. And then as I get better as a referee and feel more comfortable in my skin and trust my own ability to manage and facilitate a good game, then that can be reflected out into how I communicate with more and more players. Because when it backfires and you've opened up the door, it can make 80 minutes seem like a whole lot longer. John, what do you think?
No, exactly that. The captain's job is to be that team's leader, and theoretically, that's who you should have the relationship with on the field. If you watch the England versus Italy game on Sunday, there was a very good dialogue between Mathieu Renal and Sergio Parise, where at that level, he's not there to be a help. He's there to be a referee. If everybody's shouting at him, then the whole team should just focus on doing their job and leave him to do mine. A very clear lineation there. I think as you're coming up through, using the captain to relay messages makes things easy, but it also takes a lot of the pressure off yourself. So if there's a 13 who's just being a bit of an idiot, and you don't want to have a personal confrontation with them, giving yourself some time, some space, going to the captain who might be playing at, say, 8. Okay, hey, captain, 13 is just shouting continuously. Can you please fix him or her? Then puts the onus of that relationship onto the captain. And if 13 steps out of line, and it wasn't your problem, it wasn't your fault, it was the captain who you asked to do their job, and that sort of takes the monkey off your shoulder and puts it onto the captain. So I think use the captain as best as you can, but at the same time, I also wouldn't be so ironclad and linear that if anyone else tries to talk to you, you just completely ignore them, because I don't think that helps get that rapport or any sort of level of trust.
Yeah, honey and rapport. That should be your two takeaways. Honey and rapport is the way to go. That would be a great piece of advice to think about during a heated situation. You want rapport, be nice. It's easy to be nice. It's free to be nice. We don't charge for it. So should we move on, John? Advanced skills.
Yeah, so can we just go back one slide? Because I think we've missed one. So the 3 main sort of advanced skills that I wanted to cover off. So we covered off as a quick recap.
Yeah.
Basics, make sure you turn up. From a verbals point of view, understand who you are and have the right sort of tone. For signals, practice them, make sure that they're easy to see from 70 yards away. The one big paradox I think that a lot of referees face is that we're all experts on the law, right? Anyone who's on the USA Facebook referee page, there's a lot of law experts out there. But there can be people who make very accurate law calls that don't really go anywhere. And then you've got other referees who, by comparison, make a lot of errors. but everybody from management and the players think they're an awesome referee. So what's that about? And I think there's three main skills that those who are perceived as a good referee, even if they're not necessarily technically correct, have, and that's an ability to control a situation, the ability to transmit their message in a very clear way, and then the most important, I think, is the impression that they generally give. So I'm going to relate those sort of three back to communication, because there's also a lot more. So empathy is just clearly understanding what the teams are trying to do. So again, using your two eyes, listening with your two ears, and talking a lot less. You can control what you're saying. So again, some tips would be explain calls, don't explain the laws or the rules. Okay, because even the most experienced officials, and we have that on some of our national panel calls, we both look at the same decision and then realise that Scott was right. Or in all honesty, we're both going to look at the same scenario and we might come up with two different results. The law, however, is the law. Okay, so again, digging underneath that, why is that important? But explaining the law takes away the attention from the players who are competing, which is completely the opposite to the priority that should be for both parties. I think the second thing is watch what you say. So what you say is vitally important, and the choice of words that you use or do not use is very important. So the second bullet point on there is adaptability. As Scott was saying, if it's a nice sunny day and everyone's there, you can have a bit of a nice joke and a laugh and it's fine. If it's a really muddy day, we're into the 72nd minute and there are 2 points in it in a national semi-final, having a bit of a joke about someone with soap for hands isn't going to get you very far. So understand the situation and communicate appropriately. Scotty, flick down to the next one, please. So from the message transmission, there's two things. It is about you, and it does take two. So to gain confidence, how do you communicate? Now, for me, naturally, I use a lot of words, which is why we're still going at nearly 9:20, and Scott only gave me till 9. On the field, there's been some science. I told you I was going to get geeky. A research has shown that if you use 6 words, that is the optimal level of words that come out of an official's mouth that is accepted by a player as trustworthy. Anything shorter or anything longer has a much lower level of acceptance by players, either because they get bored or they think that you're not 100% sure of what you're doing, so you're just filling it with additional words.
Jono, can you say that again? Because I think that's a really important point for all of us to take away tonight from this webinar, if nothing else. Can you just go over that again?
Yeah, so I think, hang on, I've got it all written down. Just got to find that. Unnecessary words and actions from a referee actually don't help. Additional words actually amplify negative consequences from the players. So by going on about it, it makes them feel worse. And then that actually ends up drawing hostility onto yourself as an official, which I think is absolutely not what we want to do. So players rated 6-word explanations as the fairest compared to where no explanation was given or whether a longer explanation was given.
Great.
Because longer explanations come across as uncertain, and that reduces the trust.
So a great exercise for the referees out there tonight listening in would be to have a think about how you communicate to players in certain situations. If it's talking to a captain about behaviour or whatever, and maybe writing them down and seeing, you know, are we at the 6-word sort of mark? Are we waffling on? Are we being short? Because I guess when I was thinking about it, you know, if you are using less than 6 words, it probably comes across quite sharp and negative. Be like, stop doing that, or no more, or sort of more statements, I guess. So yeah, very, very important and powerful message, that one. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and so building on that one from what Scott was saying, again, practice them so you get ones that you like and that you think reflect who you are and what you want, and then just build out a library of stock phrases. So you can get yourself into situations either around scrum, maul, tackle, line out, all of those different things. Think around times when you might need to say something and have those done. But also in sort of more discrete scenarios, I've mentioned before, I say the same thing when I'm doing my briefing every week. If I ever send someone off, I also say exactly the same thing.
See you later, alligator.
Yeah, adios.
Yeah.
The old Josh Houston, adios. The reason being is it's a high stress scenario. So if someone's just punched someone else in the face, big whistle, bit of a kerfuffle, you've separated them off. Unless you're Scott with ice in his veins and a resting heart rate of like 20, your heart rate's going to be up there. Adrenaline's going to be pumping. You might be breathing quickly. There's a whole bunch of things. Do you really want your brain to be thinking, or do you just go to that audio file that you've stored and practiced in your head and press play? Captain, 6 red has run in and punched White in the face. Clearly that's not acceptable. I have no option. That's a red. There's nothing really to argue about. The communication's very clear why this person has received a red card. And also, because it's something I've practiced, I'm not going to stumble, I'm not going to be uncertain, and so it makes it a lot easier for me to sell that. So, as Scott said, I'd thoroughly recommend build out stock phrases and try and commit as many of those to sort of your own bank of recordings and reused library as you can. And then also practice and review them with your peers. So what sounds really great for me, I might try out, and a buddy of mine, Jim Rogers, will say, no, you come across as a pompous git, in which case maybe I need to think about that and come back again. Some of like Scott's very funny, I'm not really. So if I try to say a joke and it doesn't quite work, Scott can tell me, no, John, that isn't actually funny. So
we just got a question in from Sean about jokes, which is ironic. He wants to know from you, what are the best jokes that you do tell during the game? So do you tell jokes during the game, John, or do you just leave that up to your refereeing to be the joke?
Is that Mr. Bastick?
No, that was Sean Martin, the Bean Man from Dallas.
So being a I was more of a golfer. So there's always what is 6 inches from a golfer to a fisherman. So 6 inches to a golfer is about 6 feet. 6 inches to a fisherman's a lot smaller. So, come on, not what you tell your kids you caught a fish was that big, sort of thing, as you're trying to get distances sorted out. Like I said, I'm not very funny.
Yeah, I was going to say, is this what you tell to the players? No wonder they punch you. Holy moly. You know, so
just run into the back of me.
So look,
So,
yeah, it's
maybe from the joke spot. Maybe you take it away, Scotty, because you're
yeah.
funnier.
Well, a lot of it just is what comes to you in the moment. So I think the key with telling a joke is that it's about timing.
Timing.
It's all about timing. You know, because if you put a joke down in the wrong time in a game, it's not a good thing. You know, so yeah, I really don't have a stockpile of jokes. It's just whatever comes into the front of the brain. I guess it just comes out the mouth. It's just like bang bang.
I think
anyway.
don't try too hard. I think is the would be an important thing.
Let your personality shine. Yeah, indeed. Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide, Jono, and we're done with this one, I think. Yep.
And so I think the last one, just around sort of the impression that you give and confidence. So again, when you blow your whistle, sort of a sheepish and a weak arm signal where you don't make any eye contact, where sort of it's a little bit ambiguous what was going on and you just sort of chose to give it to red. Sort of people aren't going to go, okay. But certainly if you watch the sevens, the World Rugby Sevens, every single time a call is made, it's one of those, if it's almost as though the referee is saying to himself with the old sort of Homer Simpson, if I'm sure of anything in the world, I'm sure of this. Like chest out, big signal, short description as to why. You're not in any doubt as to that is what the call is. It's not being negotiated, etc. So have confidence, look up. If you're asking someone to move, look them in the eye. Don't sort of, number 6, could you just move out the way a little bit, please? Don't be sure of what you're asking, and if you don't have a reason to say anything, then shut up, which is sort of has been for me the biggest thing that I've been working on for my entire referee life. But it really does work, as in sometimes the more you say, the less you're actually heard and the worse it is. So less really is more. So have a presence, demonstrate confidence, like big confident whistle, big confident signal, short, sharp explanation of the call as to why, and then shut up. No more conversation. If you can do that on sort of a repeating basis, I think you're going to have a lot of good stuff.
I just wanted to say, John, there is a great example of a referee that's maybe over communicating in a rugby match on the Rugby Channel right now. So there was a curtain raiser match before the USA Argentina 15 match, and if you go and watch that game and listen, the referee's audio is being put through the broadcast, and just sit back and sort of see how that referee comes across to you, whether he comes across as a calm and control referee, or whether he comes across maybe a little bit panicked and uncertain. So it's just, I watched the game the other day. It was a really good example. And if you've got a spare, 10, 15 minutes, go watch the first, bit of that game. And it's just a great example on how over communicating in a game can come across to the audience and the players.
Cool. And then the last bit is around equity, as in everybody needs to leave that field, regardless of the score, not thinking that they've had a fair shot and it was the game of rugby that did it. The worst scenario is they leave and it was like, oh, the referee screwed us on that one. So how can you come across as fair? Again, be confident. And this is from a communication point of view. A lot of if you use the advantage system, awesome. If you haven't, then have a look at it. A lot of the competencies that you're measured against are all about creating an environment and communicating in a way that everybody feels as though they've had their fair shot at the game. And so how can you, if you communicate clearly, consistently throughout the entire game, it does really help that impression that you are confident. And if they trust you, they trust your decisions, then they feel as though they get a fun, fair game out of it. And Scott, I know you're one of the top end of the of that. What would you say? What do you use to help demonstrate this is fair?
Yeah, I think it just, again, it starts at the very beginning where you're building trust with players. And as the game goes on, you continue to build that trust by making really clear and decisions that add to the game is important as well. When John, you were talking earlier about there's the law and then there's also the game of rugby. I think that as referees, we've got our basic communication stuff, which is whistle tone, your appearance, how you signal. Then we get into the more, advanced skills of interpersonal communication. How do we deal with conflict and conflict resolution? And then there's that broad idea of, just building trust, adding to the game as a referee, not calling the minor stuff, not worrying about the minor stuff too much, just the big stuff where everyone can buy into and go, that's pretty clear and obvious. I understand what the referee's doing. And not being, because you're the referee, I think when you lack a little bit of confidence, we tend to be a little bit more headmaster-like. And, I'm the boss, don't you dare, talk to me that way. Whereas I find nowadays that a lot of the player feedback that comes to me on the field, there is quite a lot of truth behind it. So when a player's frustrated at me, when I review the match, most of the time I'm like, yeah, he's got a fair point there. So having that mindset as you go into the match that I'm not always going to be right, and taking some of the player feedback into consideration, having rapport helps, having empathy helps. That seems to have done me well up to this point. But hey, I've got a game on Saturday. Who knows, right? It's week in, week out. You never know, eh, John?
Exactly.
Yeah. So look, well, let's wrap it up. We've gone a little bit over, but that's fine. I've enjoyed it, and I really appreciate you, John, being here. Is there anything you want to say just to wrap it up before I wrap it up on my end?
No, I think just from get the basics right. Have a clear idea in your head as to what your role is and what you want to achieve. Use 2 eyes, 2 ears more than you use your mouth. So listen and try and understand what's going on before you say anything. But most of the time, just be open and enjoy it. It's what we do with our Saturdays and Sundays. There's no point doing if you're not having fun. So keep doing it, keep enjoying it.
Yeah. So again, John, thanks for taking your evening out to talk to the Texas rugby referees. I know I appreciate it immensely, and I know that our group really appreciates hearing from other experts in the field. And just to wrap it up, I would say it's honey versus vinegar. It's about building rapport or just being poor, right? So that's the takeaway for me tonight. Practice on your own when you're driving to work. When you're at the gym, that's a great time to sort of mentally go over some of these situations in your mind and refine what you want to say, and get it nutted down into a nice little package. And we will have this webinar posted on our website in a day or two with some links to some great reading that John shared with me. So if you want to listen to the webinar again, or maybe get your nerd on, as John calls it, we'll put some links up to some nerd stuff on the website. So on that note, I wish you all a great night. Good luck out there on the weekend. John, I'll see you in San Francisco Saturday morning, mate.
Cool. Looking forward to it. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks so much, everybody. Good evening. We'll catch you. Bye-bye.